In this lesson, we will learn about Share and NTFS permissions. First, we will learn about share permissions and what are the effective share permissions when multiple share permissions are granted. Then we will learn about NTFS permissions and what are the effective NTFS permissions when users granted with multiple NTFS permissions. After that, we will learn what permissions users will get when accessing an NTFS share folder. Next, we will learn about what NTFS permissions files or folders will have after they get copied or moved. And finally, we sum up our lesson with the keynotes. Let's learn about share configuration. As you may know, Share can be configured at drive and folder levels, but not at file level, which means files cannot be shared. To share files, we need to put them in a share folder. When a folder is shared on a server, users with share permissions can access the contents of the folder over the network without logging in to the server. Share permissions control what actions user can do on files and folders inside the share folder when they access this share folder over the network. Share permissions have no effect on users who log in to the server hosting the share folder and access its contents on the server. Let's look at this diagram. In this diagram, we share the departments folder on this file server. To allow this user to access the department's share folder, her user account must be granted with proper share permission for her to log into her computer and access the department's share folder over the network. However, when she logs into the file server directly, she does not need any share permission to view the contents of the department share folder. Let's move on to share permissions. As you may know, when sharing, it is possible to specify how many users can access the share folder over the network at the same time. Here are the permissions that can be set either to allowed or denied on a share folder. The lowest permission is read, which allows users to view the contents of the share folder. The next permission is change, which allows users to read plus execute, write, delete folders and files within the share. And the highest permission is full control, which enables user to read, change, and take ownership of files and folders within the share. It is important to note that deny permissions take precedence over allow permissions. Let's figure out the effective share permissions. Given a user object that is a member of multiple groups, and we set the share permissions to allowed on the user and the groups, we will have the effective permissions of the user on the share or the combination of the allow permissions. When we set the share permission to deny on the user or any of the groups, we will have the effective permission of the user on the share is denied. So the best practice is to use allow only. Now let's check the share permissions on the departments folder. To do that, we need to right-click on the Departments folder and click on Properties and click on Sharing and click on Advanced Sharing and click on Permissions. Now we uncheck all the Allow permissions and let's check the Read permissions. As you can see, when we check the Read permission, then it just takes it as a read because read is the lowest permission. Now let's uncheck it and check the change permission. As you can see, when we check the change permission, it also checks the read permission because change permission also includes the read permission. Now let's uncheck everything and check the full control. As you can see, when we check the full control, it also checks change and read because full control includes the change and read permission. So when multiple share permissions set to allowed, the effective permissions are the combination of the allowed permissions. Similarly, let's check on the change permission but on the deny. As you can see, when we check on the change permission on the deny, it also includes the read permission in the deny. Now let's uncheck everything and check on the full controls. And as you can see, when we check on the full control, it also includes the change and the read on the deny permission. So let's uncheck everything and check the full controls in the allowed. And now we check the read in the deny. As you can see, as soon as we check on the read in the deny, it will remove all the allow permissions. So when any share permission set to deny, it will remove all the allow permissions and the effective permission become denied. Let's now learn about NTFS permissions. As you may know, NTFS permissions only exist on this above Windows OS device formatted with NTFS file system. NTFS permissions can be set at drive, folder, and file levels. NTFS permissions are being checked against the users every time, no matter how they access the files and folders, over the network or directly on the servers hosting the files and folders, which means NTFS permission take effect every time the files or folders being accessed. As you may know, NTFS permissions can be inherited. The inheritance on NTFS permissions can be enable or disable. When enable, the files or folders have all the NTFS permissions set on the parent folder or drive, plus any additional permissions set on the files or folders. When disabled, specific NTFS permissions can be set on the files or folders. By default, the inheritance is enabled. Here are the basic NTFS permissions that can be set to either allow or deny on a file or a folder. Read permissions allows users to read the contents of files and subfolders in the folder and view folder ownership, permissions, and attributes. List folder contents permissions allows users to see the names of files and subfolders, but not read the contents of the files in the folder. Read and execute permission, which includes read and list folder contents permissions, and run executable files and scripts. Write permissions allows user to add files and subfolders and write to files. Modify permissions, which includes read and execute and write permissions, and delete files and folders. Full control includes modify permission and change permissions and take ownership on files and folders. The basic permissions can be broken down into advanced permissions for granular assignments. When set to allowed, it is possible to configure the NTFS permissions only take effect when certain conditions are met. When permissions are selected and ready to grant to a principal with either allowed or denied, it is possible to set with one of the following options on how the NTFS permissions apply to this folder only, this folder, subfolders, and files, and this is the default option, this folder and subfolder, this folder and files, subfolders and files, files only. Let's now figure out the effective NTFS permissions. Even a user that is a member of multiple groups, when the NTFS permissions on a file or a folder set to allow on the user and the groups, the effective permissions of the user on the file or the folder or the combination of the allow permissions. When the NTFS permissions on a file or a folder set to denied on the user or any of the groups, the effective permissions of the user on the file or the folder or the combination of the allow permissions subtract the combination of the deny permissions. Let's now check the group membership of the user A's. To do that, we need to right-click on the user A's and click on Properties and click on the Member of tab. As you can see, user A's is a member of the domain users group and the accounting and finance group and the human resources group. Let's now grant the NTFS permissions on these confidential files. To do that, we need to right-click on the file and click on Properties and click on Security tab and click Edit and click Add. Here we add the Human Resources group and we check name and we grant the modify permissions and click Apply. And now we add the Accounting and Finance group. Here we type in GRP-accounting and click check names and click OK. And we grant the full control permissions on the file for the accounting and finance. As you can see, the accounting and finance have the full control permissions, and the human resources group has the modify permissions on the files. Everything looks good. Now let's grant permission for user A. To do that, we need to click on Edit and click Add and type in user A and then click check names, then click OK. And now we allow full control permission for user A. And then we check on the deny write permission. As you can see, as soon as we click on the deny write permission, it will remove the full control permission because the full control includes the write permission and also the modify permission because the modify permission also includes the write permission and it also unchecks the write permission. Now let's check the allow full control on the user A again and checks on the modify deny permission. As you can see, as soon as we check on the deny modify permission, it's also check on the read and execute deny permission, and the read deny permission and the right deny permission, and it's remove all the permissions that includes in the modify permission. Now let's click on OK, and as you can see, as soon as we click OK, it says that the deny entries take precedence over the allow entries. Just click yes, and now we click on the advanced tab, and here we can check the effective access by typing the user A here, and click on check names and click OK, and click view effective access. As you can see, for the effective access of the user A, we see that it have only the change permission and take ownership, because the user A belong to the accounting and finance group, which has a full control, and it has a deny modify permission, so it will remove all the permission for modify. So everything looks good. Just click on OK and OK. Let's find out the effective permissions on combining shared and NTFS permissions. When a user accesses a share folder over the network and the share folder is stored on an NTFS drive, the effective permissions of the user is the most restrictive permissions given to the user on the share and NTFS. For example, user A has the following permissions on the department shared drive: read permissions on the shared and modify permissions on the NTFS. When user A accesses the department drive over the network, user A has the read permission because it is the most restrictive. So what NTFS permissions a file or a folder will have when it is copied or moved? When a file or a folder is copied, it will inherit the permissions of the destination folder or drive. When a file or a folder is moved to a different drive, it will inherit the permissions of the destination folder or drive. When a file or a folder is moved to a different folder of the same drive, it will retain its permission. To get desired permissions, use Xcopy or Robocopy utility with proper settings. This is the end of this lesson. Let's read the keynotes.